a group of veterans into my grade 5 class in 2 different years to answer questions and explain to the children a sort of idea what war was like, and trying not to have all the blood and gore that you see on TV and such like. And I found out from taping their interviews with the children and the questions the children asked that there are many terms that they didn't seem to be familiar with, that Army types and those of us that were in the living during wartime are familiar with, but they just don't seem to gather it. So I decided to, after having the 4 veterans in, I had Air Force type who had spent most of his Air Force time in England but did some flying on the continent. Another Air Force, my cousin, who had been down in Burma and flown in over the hump with supplies. A Hong Kong veteran who had, of course, a lot of stories to tell the children and handled it very, very well. And then Eddie, who represented the Army in Italy and up into Holland. And also, I guess I did this for my grandsons, because I think someday they will want to know what Grandpa did. You know, that, what did you do in the war, Grandpa? So if it appears that I'm pushing and I'm leading Eddie on, originally I did it thinking that maybe children would listen to it, and that I'm making sure that some of the expressions and things that he used are familiar. Now, it comes in the middle of a sentence, and there's no way I can avoid that. So if you'll just bear with us. Lines up in Italy, and you're, as you said, often you'd be in a house. Mm-hmm. Okay, somebody is on guard, and you think they'd what?
No, they'd come in, say 6 in the morning on the guard shift, and everybody be getting up at that time. Sometimes we'd be up, maybe working all night, but most of the time we
Now, working all night, tell us what
driving, hauling casualties back. But most of the time, if there wasn't a big push out, well, you'd just be a few casualties coming in. The odd guys getting hit. Sometimes we'd only have 2 or 3 trips a day.
Okay, so now then, you were there, and you said something further up the line. Maybe Speedy would be up there with the Jeep?
Yeah, we always had a Jeep up at the regimental aid post. If we were attached to the Cape Breton Highlanders, they had one Jeep of their own, and we'd have one up there and one back at our section where we're back down the line.
Now, back, how far apart would these be?
Oh, half a mile.
Okay.
Sometimes less than that, sometimes a little more. It
all
all depends where you could get in a good, well, generally a farmhouse, where you get in a good house in the area.
Now, up further, where you say the Jeep would be, what would it be apt to be? Another house or could it just be a little valley, a little gully, or what would it be?
Where the RIP was?
Yeah.
It'd be a farmhouse that was in close to a road.
Okay, so now do I
shelter.
Understand, though, that now the Capers, if you were with them, that's infantry.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing their fighting. I don't know how infantry mostly walking, shooting.
Yeah, they'd be holed up somewhere. They'd be maybe in a clump of farmhouses. They'd have outposts with a couple of slit trench and machine gun out.
So now somebody's injured. A Caper is injured.
Yeah.
The stretcher bearers run out, put him on a stretcher, bring him back to Speedy's Jeep, and it comes back then to you guys. Now, you said if Speedy needed to be relieved, or you guys...
Yeah, Mac and I would...
Now, Mac was your sergeant.
No, McCann was...
McCann was your sergeant, yeah.
McCann was... Monk was their sergeant. McCann was their truck driver.
Okay.
And we had 2 trucks, 2 Jeeps, and a heavy ambulance. And the heavy ambulance come from our headquarters, and one time it would be O'Dowd, next time it might be Belford, old Doc Manswick. Nobody, they moved around, but we had our own Jeep drivers with our sections. There was Cummings and
so the heavy ambulance then would take casualties from where you guys were back to the hospital, the
back
closest
to our headquarters. They called it Advanced Dressing Station, and they'd be patched up there again. First of all, they already stretcher bearers would pick a guy up. Lots of times, a few times, we helped them too. And they'd slap a bandage on them, get them back to the RAP, Regimental Aid Post, and they'd do a little more for them, tighten the bandage up, give them a shot of plasma, load them up in our Jeep. We'd whip them back to our section was the casualty clearing post. He'd be checked there again, and then either taken by Jeep back to our headquarters, or if the heavy ambulance was there, they'd load him up in the ambulance and take him back.
So at your place, where you are, where we just woke you up, there would be two drivers, you and Mac. There'd be your sergeant.
Yeah, corporal.
There would be a cook.
Yeah.
Because when you woke up, you said you'd have a wash. You remember washing in cold water, shaving if there was time. Then you'd go into the room next, and Lammy would have what? How did he cook breakfast?
He had these hydro burners. They're gas, like a big blowtorch.
Okay, and what would he be cooking?
Oh, we always had a bit, try to have porridge. Never had toast or anything. Porridge, bread, and sometimes canned bacon was and I don't, powdered eggs. I don't ever remember fresh eggs unless we found some.
Okay, so breakfast's over.
And
coffee.
Coffee and marmalade. Always marmalade.
Always marmalade.
Oh, Jesus.
I didn't think you'd eat marmalade after having it for that length of time. But so, all right, breakfast is over now. Would you guys hang around and help Lammy clean up too?
Yeah, we'd all have something to do. Either help Lammy clean, cook, or else we'd, I don't know, it was always something to do.
Okay, in the wintertime, and it used to be miserable cold over there. What about fire? What about warmth?
We had a fire, but
what kind of stoves were in those houses?
There was mostly fireplaces in the houses. But then we'd get start up Lammy's blowtorch cook, and
what was it? What was the fuel for it?
It was gas under pressure. You pumped it in something like it was like one of these old gasoline lanterns in it.
But all you could get warm would be your hands, or
no, it kicked out quite.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Heat a whole room?
I guess it wouldn't time, but most of the time that it was wet and cold, but the temperature wasn't too much below freezing. In the mornings, the ground would be firm, but then it'd be by noon it was generally thawed out again.
So then, what did you sleep on?
Floor.
With just your blankets?
Everybody had his bedroll.
And did you take your uniform off every night?
I don't know. I guess we did.
And you had long underwear.
Oh, darn right.
Down there, you had long underwear. You had pure wool socks.
Yeah.
Okay? And your tunic and your shirt, your pants. Now, a great coat.
Yeah, I used mine most of the time for a pillow.
You used your great coat for a pillow? Gosh, I'd have thought you'd wanted more for heat on
well,
your body than
yeah,
that.
I did, but then if it was real cold, you'd put it over.
But what about your pack? Why didn't you use it for a pillow?
I don't. It was generally out in the truck. But you get half a dozen or 8 or 10 guys sleeping in a room, they all create a bit of
heat.
Yeah. We had 3 blankets, and I had mine made into a bedroll.
Did you have safety pins?
Nope.
You did the old scout fold, eh? Did you? Or did you just wrap up like them in a cocoon?
I had a Japanese, Italian ground sheet I'd picked up somewhere. It had snap buttons on it, if I remember right. And I had the blanket folded down the bottom, 2 over it, then this ground sheet around it. And I could roll it up just like a bedroll.
A sleeping bag, kind of.
I used to carry it behind me.
Okay, when you got out of bed, what'd you do with this stuff?
Well, if it wasn't going to move, we'd just roll it up.
But how would you know you weren't going to move?
Well, we'd have it so you'd always maybe have a...
But you did roll it up, and you didn't just leave it lying there.
We didn't leave it laying on the floor. We always just rolled up and stacked it out of the... But generally, when we moved into a house, we'd take one room for any casualty come in, and we never stayed and slept in there. We'd have another room. That's where you slept, and someplace to cook.
Now, if you were sent up, say you were going to Speedy came back, and you were sent up to take Speedy's place with the smaller Jeep to that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the shelling got bad enough that Monk got word from headquarters to move out of there. That house was too dangerous. It wasn't, or the enemy was on the, coming. And so when you came back with your casualties, they had moved on. Would there be somebody there to tell you where to go? Or would you hit right for headquarters?
I think we'd hit right for headquarters.
And where would your kit be? Where would your stuff be? In the big truck? In your big heavy ambulance that you were driving, or what?
I guess
somebody would load it?
Yeah. But I don't ever remember us moving. On the spur of the moment like that. If it come a heavy shell and we just sit it out. But if the line moved up ahead, that's when the Duke, the DR, and Monk, and one of the Jeep drivers, would go up and scout out a house.
Now, when they changed line, when the infantry changed, the Capers came out of the line and the Irish went in.
Mm-hmm.
They would march right past where you guys were?
Yeah, most of the time, because they'd leave, the regiment that was in the line would stay there until their reinforcement come up.
Yeah.
And then they generally done this at night, and the reinforcement, or the whole regiment come right out.
Now, when they came back then, say the Capers were relieved by the Irish and the Capers came back to go out of the line for their rest or whatever, would they stop in on their way by where you guys were?
Sure, some of the times if some guy had a little scratch or something, or
it wasn't bad enough to come back in the Jeep, he'd pull in and your MO would fix him up.
Fix him up. But
who did you get to know and have the most to do with, the Irish or the Capers?
Capers and Highlanders. Most of the time, Monk section is with them.
Why? How would that come about? Who'd make that decision? Would Monk be able to say to Liscombe, we get along great with the Capers. Can we be the ones there with them?
It could have been, because there'd be a push coming out if the whole brigade was out. That's the Irish, the Perce, and the Capers. We'd generally be back at our headquarters. And if the brigade's going back in again, well, they'd have a meeting, I guess, at brigade headquarters, and then word would come up to our bunch at our headquarters. They'd have a meeting, and like Monk and the other section sergeants would all have a meeting in the north, and then come back, and Monk say, well, we're going to be with the Cape Breton Highlanders. Golden section is going to be with the Irish.
Somebody else was.
The other section will be with the Perth, and then there'll be an ambulance going to the artillery. And then
who were the artillery? What
17th Field Artillery, they called it.
I don't remember you talking about being attached to them.
No, I never was. It was always generally just an ambulance and a driver and an orderly.
Like, I don't even remember you talking about the Perth that much either. So
we were with the Perth some, and the house was blown down.
You're with Perth when the house got hit.
Yeah, but most of the time, for some reason, we went with Cape Breton Highlanders. I don't know why.
All right, now we're going on with this day. If you were away from the place you got wakened up from at lunchtime,
if I'd have gone back maybe for supplies or something,
where would your lunch be, and what would it be, and how would you eat it? Just when you were hungry, or?
Guess so. I don't.
Did you always have a K ration with you?
Yeah, there was.
Because I can't imagine you not eating when you were hungry.
We always seemed to have meals at regular times. I don't remember too much of.
If you were up picking up wounded from the Capers would you sit in and be?
Yeah, if they were having dinner, they'd feed us. Get somebody's mess in. And even if we happened to be back at headquarters, getting supplies or taking casualties back, it was dinner time, we'd fall in the line up there and they always fed you.
Yeah. I don't know how they ever kept track of how many people they had to feed and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And when you would take a load back to, say, if there was enough for you to take your heavy ambulance and go back to base hospital, would it be that you would bring back food on your return trip up to the line, or would you bring back medical supplies for the ARP and for your,
If we took, we've taken a couple of guys on the Jeep into our headquarters. If we were short anything, old Monk or the officer drop in at MIR, that was a medical inspection room, pick up 2 cases of plasma or.
would he give you a piece of paper saying
you
that
had,
you to have
yep,
this?
you had to have a little slip.
Requisition
Yeah.
sort of
You
thing?
turn that in, or else you'd go down. You wanted blankets.
And did they initial it? So they'd know who gave the, like, no way you could take that bunch of blankets and sell them on the black market or something because you would have signed for them?
You signed for them. If you couldn't produce them, you had to pay for them. So.
Yeah.
And I think every day we go back to pick up supply, like rations and stuff.
Now, how often were your blankets washed, and where did you have to take them to be washed, and what
They
happened?
went back. There was an outfit ordinance, and they had a mobile laundry thing. And I remember taking a whole truckload of blankets back one time. I turned in so many, and I picked up so many clean ones, and they were set up alongside a river there, and they were washing these blankets.
So you have no sheets,
No, it was all
just
army blankets.
just army blankets.
And there were so many blankets to a Jeep. 2 blankets, I think it was, and the heavy ambulance had, I think they had 6.
Could you fellows ever use those if there were no
yeah,
casualties?
Sure.
How many fellows slept in the ambulances and on the stretchers and so on?
Quite a few, but most of that back at headquarters. And if you're up in the line, you seem to. I don't ever remember sleeping in an ambulance up in the line because.
Too obvious, like too.
Yeah, you seem to be sitting out in the open.
Yeah.
In the summertime, well, a lot of the time we'd roll up instead of in the house underneath the truck.
But that was just as obvious as it being in the back of the
but
truck on an ambulance, in a stretcher if
there
it's
was
going to be
something over-
bombed or something.
Something over top you made you feel better.
Like a big steel frame that come down and hit you on the head, eh?
And some of the time, I can remember being in spots where in the farmhouse, one place where the civilians were still there. They took one part of the house and we took the other.
Do you ever remember them looking at you with fear? Did you ever wonder if they were going to knife you in the night or
No,
steal you blind or anything like that? Or were they always
they
very
all
glad to see
seemed to be
you?
glad to see us.
Was it fake or was it true? Did you ever feel that they were just buttering up to get some more
Well,
food or
the odd
something?
time. I know one time we moved into a spot and they weren't friendly at all, and then they all disappeared. I don't know where they went, and about 10 minutes after we were mortared.
Oh, so there was a reason for that.
Yeah, I figured they tipped them off somehow. They
Yeah.
weren't friendly at all. Then the next house we moved into, I'd say maybe half a mile up the road, they were altogether different. And they'd known we'd been in this other place, and they kept saying fascist, fascist.
All right, now.
We got even with them. We took one of their turkeys.
How in the hell did they cook a turkey with a flamethrower on a little gas burner?
I think we sent it back to headquarters.
Did they have real ovens back in headquarters? Like, or what kind of stoves would they have there? Like Lammy's doesn't sound like even
No,
glorified
it is.
hot plate.
Yeah, that's
Was
all it was.
It was a hot plate,
But
like a camp.
Headquarters, they generally pick a spot, try to get into a hospital or something, take over a wing of a hospital, and they'd have take over part of the kitchen stuff. Because if nobody come up into Holland, they got a Lee Warden. And we'd taken over an old folks home. They had the kitchen and everything.
But down in Italy, they just didn't have the hospitals, the setups the same as in the mountains that they had in the Netherlands.
I just don't know how the cooks made out.
How often or when would you be in headquarters just to pick up supplies? You were never attached to or stationed at headquarters. Like some of the guys were headquarters.
Yeah.
You call them, well, he was headquarters. You didn't. He wasn't in the line wasn't with you fellas, were you ever actually in headquarters for any length of time?
Oh yeah, the brigade was out.
How often would the brigade come out?
Well, it had a, I don't know.
Did they consider this little bit of time that you'd have when the brigade was out and you were up in headquarters as a kind of rest period, a
Yeah,
leave
which
for
was,
you?
we'd go back to headquarters and we'd go over our equipment and get everything supply. We always kept a supply of stuff in the trucks. We'd check them all out.
But you could still hear shelling. You could
Oh, yeah,
still, everything was still like you were in the lines, only you weren't as close. Eh?
Yeah, we remember one whole brigade, we were 40 miles back in this town, Urbino. And you'd be doing guard duty at night. You could hear the guns. If the wind was right, you could hear the guns and see the flash in the sky. And the first dib was up in the line then. And most of the time, let's say he was attached to the capers. And the capes come out, and the Irish relieved them. We would come out with the capers. Sometimes we'd go back to headquarters, but most of the time we'd stay right with the capers because they'd be going back in with
right away
in the week or 3-4 days. Sometimes we'd be on our own, and we'd move into a farmhouse because most of the times you go back to headquarters. Our section is 20-odd men. Well, there's a 20-odd men that headquarters has got to.
So they put you on guard duty.
Oh yeah.
Who did it when you guys weren't there?
Headquarters to guess.
So this was their arrest too, then?
I suppose. The service corps did all the guard duty.
Yeah. And there wasn't too many service corps up at the headquarters then. And if they were, what were their duties? They'd be hauling petrol and haul water.
Yeah, they had a petrol truck, a water truck, a ration truck. Sandercock from Morden, he hauled all the rations from the ration point to headquarters.
And the ration point would be like back closer.
Yeah, it may be back 8-10 miles.
Out of the line.
Yeah.
So Sandy then actually, in essence, was never up in the. Did he ever come up to where you were? Does he know what you're talking about when you say up in the line?
He would know, but I think he'd come up couple of times, once anyway, to relieve some guys.
Sometimes I wonder if that's why he doesn't feel quite as free at the reunions as you other guys do, who were up there practically all the time.
Maybe.
Unless he can sit and talk to some of the other headquarters fellas.
Take old Scotty Cadzo. He was only up twice to the sections.
That was probably enough at his age.
Said the first time he didn't know what you were supposed to do.
Well, I don't know how anybody knew what they were supposed to do because, you know, when you think of it, you were in a country you'd never laid eyes on in your life before. You didn't know half the time where you were going and why you were going there.
Well, if you're going up in the line, most of the time, say you're with the Capes, they'd be trucked up within a mile, no, maybe 2 miles, and they'd stop, and they'd walk in, and we
full
had
packed.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All their ammunition, all their rifles, everything.
Yeah, machine guns and everything. And we'd had to wait there till they got up the road, maybe out of sight, because our motors, like the Jeeps and stuff, if it was still night, they could hear them. So we'd have to stay back there. And then maybe in half an hour or so, we'd hit up to where we were going.
But how would you know that in the meantime they might not have had to dig in?
Well, if there was anything happened, you'd hear us.
There was never any, like, they didn't send advanced people out to spy around to see what was going on and then
they'd have their scouts out ahead. When they got in the line.
What if the scouts came back and said, hey, there's a big concentration of Germans just over that hill. We better tuck it in right here.
We'd just stay right where we were.
But how would you know?
Well,
would somebody come back and tell you?
They
from
had
their
DRs, and they were supposed to go back and let us know, but half the time they didn't,
Well, bikes would give it away that they were going back, wouldn't it?
But if you're going up and there was a wind blowing, you pretty well stayed with them, but it was a calm night. You had to sit back and wait till they got up the road. And then,
That they were dug in closer to you than you thought they were and blundered into something.
well, it was went into the Gothic line. That was the end of August, 44. We got across the river in the 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And the capers went up this hill 120, got halfway up, there was nothing there. And there was a house, a root house, halfway up. We could see it from the river. And Monk took the medical guys and the 2 jeeps. He went up and set up in this house, and the keepers started to go up to the top of the hill, and the Jerrys are dug in there and just waited to go up, and then they had to fall back twice. And then about 2 or 3 in the morning, I was up there then. I hooked right up in the Jeep.
Why?
Well, to see what was going on mostly.
Can't believe how you just took off and went.
Well, he left 2 trucks, Mac and I back with the 2 trucks, and I think it was Hal Ritz was with us. And we didn't know what the hell was going on. We hear all this, so one of the Jeeps, I saw it coming in the moonlight coming down. It was a Dowd. And I hooked a ride with him, went up. He went up so far, then we had to carry him down, the casualties back down.
Carry a casualty?
Yeah,
Yeah.
stretchers. Anyway, the 2 tanks come up. They got one each side of the building, shell on the top of the hill, and Mac and I had to hold a blanket over this window on the north side, so they're working on casualties. They had to have lights. They had a lantern going. And 2 or 3 casualties in there. I know we hauled out 40, I think it was 46 capers.
Well, why did you hold the blanket?
Well, because so the light wouldn't shine out the top of the hill. We knew the Jerrys were up there then, because they were shelling the hell out of us.
But
Machine gun.
the pressure or something.
And yeah, and the guns would fire, the tank guns, they were right alongside the buildings. The concussion would blow the blanket. We had to put it back on. Then when they come up an hour or so after that, said, get the hell out of here. We worked back to the river. So we walked back down to the river. I expect to get shot that night. Jesus.
You thought there was Germans somewhere around?
No, I thought by our own guys.
Oh, you figured they might think you were Jerry's coming through them.
Yeah.
Do you ever have a password to
Yeah,
use?
we had passwords. And I don't
Were you challenged?
Mostly, who the hell that? Where the hell are you going? See, 24th, we're going back to the river. But anyway, next morning, tanks went around behind this hill, and got 128 Jerrys. They give it up.
So what happened to them? Who took them back?
I don't know. They didn't. The capers were going to shoot them right there, so they took the officers, the company capers, and they shook them down farther. And that's where we followed them down. Then we found a trail out of the riverbed. We climbed up, got up top, and there was a cluster of farm buildings. So we pulled in there, and just got in there. And then I guess the Jerrys had seen us coming. We mortared us steady for about off and on for about an hour and a half.
And how close were the mortar shells to
They
where
were close.
Like with the walls?
He never hit the
shape
house,
or-
but he plumped them in the yard and then over the barn.
So where were you guys? Under
Saunders and I spent most of the hour underneath the truck.
out in the courtyard.
Of course, you're underneath the truck. And a chunk of shrapnel hit the frame just over our head and banged down.
I imagine it'd be a little noisy then too.
Oh, God, yeah. They really clumped us.
And Saunders wears a hearing aid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Old
Here's
dog.
another one to remember.
Yeah.
And O'Dowd's. Mm-hmm.
Oh, dog was. Nanzik was there with the heavy animals.
Well, that was
Old
another.
dog. And then the capers were supposed to send a DR back to show where they were set up, and they never did come back. And we'd been up all night before. And then after dark, we bedded down, and I remember, I think O'Dowd was there. I'm not too sure. Yeah, O'Dowd was there with the other heavy ambulance. And Liscombe, or Monk, come along. You got Mac and I to take the two Jeeps. Him and Liscombe. Liscombe went one Jeep, and Mac was driving it, and Monk come with me. And I was, two of us went up this road, and it was real bright moonlight. You could see damn near half a mile. And we went up the road, made a curve to the right, and here was a cluster of farmhouses. We went past it about 100 yards. And Mac stopped, and Liscombe come back, and he says to Monk, I think we better get out of here. I don't like the looks of this. So we turned around and drove back down the road, past this farmhouse again. And we went down the road maybe a quarter of a mile, and we stopped. We sat in the ditch all night till come daylight. I don't know what time this was. It must have been 10 or 11. But I know we sat there all night in the ditch. A couple of blankets around us. Mac and I each had our Tommy gun, that's all.
Protection.
And come daylight, the capers, we seen them going up the little valley, and the ridge, the road followed this valley, and they seen them coming up, and I don't know how many Jerry's they got out of this house that we went past. Then later on, we moved up to set up in the house, and here was a machine gun, still in the window, Jerry machine gun. And they had to see us go by, because we were only about 20 or 30 yards from the road.
But they maybe were an observation post or something.
Well, they wouldn't open up the, I suppose, Red Cross vehicles, I don't know, but...
Oh, they think that matters?
With most of them it did. Not with artillery, because they couldn't see us. But with rifle and machine gun fire, we had machine gun fire, but not too much. You know, we figured we were a good mile, or a good half mile past the Capers outpost.
Into the German lines.
Yeah, but we never saw a hide in a hair of the Capers. Don't know where the hell they were. We never saw them come daylight.
I think you must have had a lucky star hanging over you guys. No wonder you're such good friends.
And then, I don't know where we went after that. That Gothic line, that was just where we went out. I think we were out for 36 hours, or 40 maybe.
How'd you stand the quiet?
No, we went actually we didn't move, we just sat there. And the other regiment went ahead. Remember the artillery moved up 25 pounders? No, that was a different time. They moved up where we'd come back for a rest. And they sort of, what are you guys doing way up front? We're back for a rest. So they start setting their guns up, and we got the hell out of there. We went back up farther.
Well, let's go now. You said you landed in Italy in November.
November the 43.
And then you did what for a couple of months? You went south?
Yeah, we was in a camp just out of Naples, and we started getting vehicles from the British who were going back to England.
They had brought these from the desert?
Yeah, through North Africa and Sicily and all.
They were pretty good shape, I presume.
Yeah, they were.
So you fellows had to get them all tip-top?
Yeah, we took over their vehicles.
Who did the work on the motors?
We didn't have much motor. If our motor went, we just left it there, and they pulled it back to ordnance after that and put a new motor in. But our biggest trouble was gas lines, and there'd be sandballs and stuff in it.
And you fellows did your own?
Oh yeah, we pulled the gas.
Even though you were a driver, you still did mechanical work on your vehicle.
You were supposed to get permission to do anything like that, but
Okay, so you got your vehicles all so that they were at least would run for a while and so on.
Then we took off from just outside of Naples, over the mountains down to Altamira. That was down in the heel of the boot.
Was that your first encounter with the actual enemy?
No, that was going back. We were going away from the line then. Went back there and we were there for Christmas and New Year's.
They must have known that once you got into the lines, you weren't going to get much rest, so they were going to get you a little bit of a R&R right then, were they?
No, that we had to get everything in shape.
Would you do it all tomorrow then?
Oh, they worked on their stuff, and they were getting supplies up. All this medical stuff had to be brought up off the boats, and getting everything established, as they call it.
Then what?
And then we took off for Ortona.
No.
The 5th div relieved the 1st div in Ortona, sometime first week in January, I think.
Okay. Tell me now how you knew you were in the front and what it was like as you were coming to it.
Well, we were on the road. Remember spending one night in an area, I think we were about halfway up, and the next night we pulled in just the top of a big valley, and daylight we'd see Ortona. That's where I heard the first actually gunfire.
And how far away would it be?
Well,
Was there shelling or just?
yeah,
right
there were
fire?
shells going over all the time then, but we didn't know the difference in here them and ours.
Yes,
We
but
could hear these
you
shells.
didn't hear these at Altamira.
No.
Okay. So
This was the first shelling we ever heard. I'd say we're 4 or 5 miles, maybe 10 miles back.
Okay, and you'd see them land and you could see bursts?
No.
Or not?
No, couldn't see it. All we'd see was a gun flash in the sky.
At night?
And I remember we had to do our guard duty, and I was out 12 to 2 or 2. It was in the night anyway. And I remember standing under an olive tree. I found out after that was the worst place I could have stumbled. It was a shell had hit a tree.
You'd be
Yeah,
thinking,
if you're out anywhere else, it was muddy then, and the shell would go in the ground and explode. But if it had to hit a tree, well, it would just cut you right down.
okay, so then, when were you sent up with the Capers or with the Irish or whoever the first time?
I
And
think
that was at
the
Ortona?
11th Brigade went into. They were holding the line. They're just in the line, and then they decided they weren't supposed to do anything. They got seasoned. We were green troops. Then some guy, well, we'll make a little push and go down to this Aurelia River, straighten the line out. The Jerry's are there, and God, they took a beating.
Who took a beating?
Capers did. Capers and Islanders.
And that was your first casualties
That
that you
was the
brought
first,
in?
actually, war casualties that we had. And they were brought into. I was in Ortona. The line was only 2 or 3 miles. Mac wasn't our driver then, it was old Opos. But I wasn't on the jeeps at all during that. I was just in the section in Ortona, just stayed there. Just the other 2 jeeps, I don't even know who were driving them then.
Now, the first time you had to drive somebody who was a real casualty,
That had to be about February.
okay, did it seem like, as the kids would say, was that the time when you wished to God you could get Mom and Dad to come and get you and go home? Or
Yeah,
do you remember that being a
yeah,
terrible,
it was the
first
Irish regiment, and that was after Ortona. That had to be in February. They'd gone out on patrol. The patrol, they'd go out a certain area and come back in a certain area, and they got mixed up and come back to the wrong place. And somebody never challenged. He just opened up with a machine gun, one of his own guys.
oh, it was his own fellow, own
Oh, yeah.
side that got him? Oh, God.
It was,
And he knew it?
I don't know, must have. I forget how many there was, but I remember that one guy, He died on the Jeep on the road back. I had to take him back to RCCP, maybe a mile. Before I got him back, he was dead.
You were alone with them?
I think I was. I don't remember an orderly being there.
Now, what about German? Did you ever take German
Yeah,
prisoners back
yeah.
who had been wounded?
Yeah,
Well,
lots.
how did they act? What were they like?
Just same as the other guy. Most of them couldn't speak English.
Did they look as if they thought you were going to
Not
dump
really.
them over the side of the mountain, or you
No.
were going to?
Most of them were so damn glad to get out of it, but probably been laying out 2-3 hours.
You ever give them a smoke?
Oh yeah, sure. Fix them up. Das is good, yeah. Roll them up, take them out. They'd go out with our guys.
Imagine.
Going down the road one night. This was in the Gothic line too, Coriana Ridge. I had a Jerry. I'd taken over from Speedy, I guess, at night. And there was 4 shell holes in the road, and I knew where they were. I come along, weaving around these shell holes, and plunk, they hit a 5th one. They must have put in while between trips.
You mean when you went up, there were 4 holes there, when you come back, there was another?
5, yeah. I hit her dead center. Boom. The poor Jerry, I guess, couldn't have killed him. Give a big screech out of him. He had a broken leg. I don't think he fell off the Jeep.
Were you ever taking casualties back when you were shelled?
Oh, yeah.
Often?
Well, I would say often. We'd say we were up at the RAP, and generally, if the mortar crew was watching the road, they generally shell it just about dark. Mac and I got caught one time going up to. We'd taken over Speedy's Jeep, and I guess it'd be Cummings. We went up just at sundown. We got the hell shelled out of us that time. But most of the time, you'd wait, be maybe shell on the road, and as soon as it quit, if you had a casualty, you'd take off and go to beat hell. But at night, you couldn't do that.
But did you ever? It never get so bad that you left the Jeep and dived for the ditch, or
no? Well, it
left
was
the truck
empty.
Empty, but
Oh,
not
yeah.
if you had casualties.
No, not if you had casualties, because poor buggers.
They were sticking ducks.
Yeah, we figured you couldn't stop and unload them because we were just real sitting duck then, so we just used to bore it through. That's how Speedy got Smoke of the Sage got the Silver Star.
Because somebody saw him driving through the shells.
He saw him. And Roach said he should have got something too. He just scared Smokey was. Jeez.
So then actually all the time you were in Italy, which we figured out a little while ago was around a year and a half, around 18 months, something like that. That was pretty well what you did every day, with the exception of being maybe out for a couple of days or something once in a while.
I think one time we were out for 5 weeks. The whole brigade was out after the Hitler line. Our whole div was out, I guess. The New Zealanders and the South Africans had taken over. And we were out from 4th of June to sometime in August.
When did you do your time with the Gurkhas?
That was after Ortona, was February.
And who were they with? Were they put in with the?
They weren't
with the 11th Brigade, were they?
No, they were working with us, I guess, but they weren't attached to us. I think they just had a section of the.
Their own officers and everything?
The ones I had anything to do with were British officers. The MO and stuff was a British guy.
But were you attached? Was the 24th Field attached to them, or
No,
how did you happen to?
They just wanted don't know what happened to their Jeep. They were short a Jeep, so they asked for a Jeep
And
and a
guess
driver. And so I went up. I think there was one, Smoky or Speedy or something. We'd been up that day, and I went up. I spent 2 nights up there with. We were supposed to make an attack in.
Where were you? Like, so you spent 2 nights with them in a house?
Just in a house.
Just you and them?
First night they wouldn't talk to me. The second night they'd speak better English than I could. It wasn't the Gurkhas that were back there. There was the
Punjabs?
no, Punjab's the ones with the turbans. These fellows Mohammedans or Mohammed. They did all the cooking and they were stretcher bearers. They weren't Gurkhas, but they were with the Gurkhas.
They'd be the servant class. I suppose.
They were the medical men. And the British MO.
Well, did they not have the same kind of a system where the MO had his field ambulance with him? Or what happened there?
I don't know, because I was the only Jeep around.
That was like the British ARP.
And the first evening I was there, a mortar crew, a Canadian mortar crew moved in. They 4 mortars. They set up, and they fired so many rounds apiece. I don't know where they were shooting at. Then they packed up and got the hill out, and we were left. We figured, well, they'd figure out where those shells, but they never did mortar back. And then that night, I remember I was sleeping on the floor in this house, and somebody tried to get in the door, and the 2 guys jumped up and grabbed a rifle and stood each side of the door, and I could see them. They said, okay, you come in. That fella never come in. I don't know who the hell it was. Jesus.
Maybe it was somebody that shouldn't have been coming in.
Well, I don't know. I think maybe it was one of their own guys, and just tried the door and figured out in the wrong place. It was a long, low building. I don't know what it was.
Now, I think we're going to run out of tape here, so after Italy was all over, you loaded on boats.
Yeah, we were on the northeast side of Italy, up around Lake Comicio or something.
And